ones returned this afternoon. I like studying characters in the Old Testament, individuals in the Old Testament. There's so much they have to teach us. Of course, the problem you get into is pronunciations of their names on occasion, because if you will note that in Daniel 1, the three guys here that we're talking about were Mishael, Azariah, and Hananiah. I think it's their real names. So the ones that come afterwards given to them by Nebuchadnezzar was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which of course is so much easier to pronounce. But nevertheless, when you get into some of these characters, you have to always look at the context. But I have always looked at these as examples God has given us to follow concerning the way they looked at things. The perspective these three guys had was shared by Daniel and several others, evidently, because when they were captured, and I'm going to go ahead and be graphic and invite you to and challenge you to look some of this information up, but because I kind of ruffled a feather on occasion when I brought this up. But if you know much about the conquest of things, when somebody's conquered, the people who are conquered are not treated well. And very often it's the case that people in royal positions wanted people of culture and education to serve them. And so therefore, when they went over and conquered a people, they took the royalty, and that royalty they took was adapted a bit so that they could serve in the courts of royalty. And that adaptation very often was castration. I don't know whether many of you realize or not, but when Israel was conquered, it was predicted that this was going to happen to their sons of royalty. Now, if you can imagine, some of you men particularly, being taken into custody, and that's the first thing that goes. They treat you like a bull and make you a steer, and then they tell you, you are going to serve the guys that did this to you, and you better do it well or we'll kill you. And so that's what we're looking at in this context. Guys like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in a foreign country, pressed to service, mutilated, diminished from their royalty and from their position in their homeland, and now they're nothing but slaves. So to rise to the cream of the crop, it's almost waxing back to the Joseph scenario, or Joseph syndrome as I call it, where you don't matter what condition you're in, you do the best you can, and as cream rises to the top, you will too. Well, these guys did, and they were put over a considerable amount of responsibility and influence, as well as Daniel. But because you are in a circumstance where you're serving, and the one we're looking at particularly here, does not mean you forget who you are. I really appreciated some comments made earlier, I think in the Bible class, having to do with being a Christian. And when we're a Christian, we live Christianity. That's who we are. Always. It's not this pile of bricks in which we meet that makes us who we are. We don't become somebody here, and then when we leave, we're somebody else, and we conduct ourselves totally differently. That's not how it works. And so therefore, if we're Christians always, we just don't ever forget who we are in whatever environment we are in. And certainly it is the case with these guys. They're not going to forget who they are. They are still God's children. And you just don't worship idols. So when Nebuchadnezzar sets up this great image and he says, when I start playing the band, and the band kicks it off, y'all all bow down to this idol. And of course Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so they didn't do that. And they got told on. There's always somebody out there, by the way, looking for some reason to find flaws with you. Part of the persecution we put up with today is along those lines. There are people out there, they know what you stand for, and I think that's the irony of it. They know you are trying to be a good person. And it's funny to me that some people just can't stand the fact that somebody is successfully trying to be a good person. They're just there to wreck your life. That's all they're there for. Satan's number one people. They want to see how badly they can hurt you or diminish you because you are God's child. And there's folks out there like that. That's all their job. Make your life miserable. And so sure enough, when they didn't bow down, they got told on. Somebody ratted them out. And so they come before Nebuchadnezzar. And I think it's kind of interesting. In verse 13 is where we're going to kind of start. Nebuchadnezzar was in a rage and a fury. Now, let's understand that these guys understood Proverbs 20 and 2. I know we've heard Proverbs 20 and 1 talked about quite a bit. Wine's a mocker. But 2 is equally relevant to us today in what it states. And even though we don't have a kingdom in America, we still have a responsibility to understand what's being taught. And so therefore the wrath of the king is like the roaring of a lion. Whoever provokes him to anger sins against his own soul. That's one of those proverbs I read and I sit back, look at it and go, well, duh. You make the guy on top mad, you're risking yourself because he's got the power. Nebuchadnezzar had the power. The life and death of individuals that came before him was in his hand. What he decided is that's the way it was. Now, that's not the case in our democracy, more or less. But it is certainly the case that going out and just trying to make some law enforcement official mad is not smart. I've seen some of the dumbest things in my life. People get stopped for a speeding ticket. And the funny part is, most of them know they were speeding. So that's not even a question. But then you start giving the officer he is responsible for enforcing the law. He's not picking on you. He's responsible for enforcing the law. And he's about to give you a ticket or a warning. And you reach out the window and smart off to it. That's not smart. That's all that is. Not smart. I don't normally drive over the speed limit at all, but every now and then, mindless me, I get into one of those situations and you be driving along and they pull you over, and the first thing I want to do is pull out my concealed carry, which you don't have to have anymore in Texas. We got an open carry law. But I do. I pull it out and I give it to the officer so that he can read it and see that I'm a concealed carry guy and I follow the rules wherever I can, and they promptly just give it right back. I don't need this. Okay, fine. But for the most part, because I'm being respectful and nice to them, and yes sir and no sir, it goes a long way. About half the time we start talking about the gun I'm carrying. And I know that's annoying for some people when they get stopped, that he's getting off with everything just because he carries a gun. He gets to talk to the officer about the gun. But when you're respectful and you honor those who are in charge, you get along a whole lot better, and you'll go a long way to mitigating whatever flaw, perhaps, that's involved in this confrontation. But you don't go out and make them mad on purpose. That wasn't what these 3 guys were trying to do. They understood Proverbs 20 and 2. You don't make the king mad. We're not doing that on purpose. So in understanding that the king is furious, and it talks about Nebuchadnezzar in rage and fury. It wasn't he was just a little ticked off. He was angry in a big way. This was the life of these 3 guys. And yet when they were approached about falling down, because here's the thing that the king did, which I think is a testament to maybe his patience in this matter. He's going to give them another shot. I'm going to do this again. Y'all messed up the first time. He really liked these guys, and these guys did him a good job. That's just kind of another little side angle that you might look at. It's easier for people to give you credibility and to listen to your viewpoint if they look at your life and they see everything good. Hard-working, honest, straightforward, good person. When somebody like that speaks up, you tend to listen to them a bit. You tend to think more of those kinds of people. Now, somebody's always causing trouble, never does a good job, lazy, and they have an idea, I'm sorry. I just don't want to hear it from somebody like that. And so therefore, these guys were valuable, and he's going the extra distance in his fury and wrath and giving them an extra chance. And what they respond with is very poignant. It's very pointed. They said, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter." He said, they're telling him, you know who we are. And we've already, when we first started here, we wouldn't eat the king's delicacies. We had vegetables and water and ended up more plump than the rest of them and more desirable as a servant than the rest of them. So you know how we are. By the way, doesn't that speak volumes about their entire life? Long before this incident, long before they got here, where their life was challenged, their lifestyle spoke volumes. He knew that. That's why he was giving them another chance. I dare say He was just stalling because he knew good and well these guys are not going to budge on this issue. He knew them well enough that that was the case. Do people know you well enough to know that if they approach you with some idea or some thought that is not right, you're not going to respond positively? I mean, they know that before they get to you. I used to have that in the Navy all the time. Guys would come up to me and they want to do something. And, well, I know you're not going to like this. I said, if you know I'm not going to like it, why are you telling me? You know, why are you asking me for this time off or this break or whatever it is that you need? If you know I'm not going to like that. The whole point was, they said if it is the case that our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, he will deliver us from your hand, O king. This is a very hard thing for a person like Nebuchadnezzar to take. There is somebody that exists that is your boss. I think sometimes it's very difficult for people to exercise civil disobedience because so many are caught up so much in the world as it is now, not looking to the world that is to come. And they fear those who kill the body instead of the one who could kill the soul in eternity. We have to take this on as a mentality. And by the way, these three men had that going for them long before they got to this point. I'm convinced also that much of the courage that you see in individuals has to do with their training and their preparation for moments just like this. A lot of people I know who live in the fantasy world are believing, yeah, when it really comes down to it, things buckle down. Well, I know I'm going to stand up. But they've never practiced. They've never trained. They don't have the answers in their mind. They have not ever visualized how this will go down and what I will need to do. That's why our military trains so much. They have war games. Why? So that they can learn how to conduct themselves when the bullets are flying past you. And I don't know about you, but if you've never, boys can tell you this, when there's bullets flying past your head, you think, and of course I was hunting at the time, they weren't supposed to be there. But when they're trying to kill you, I can imagine that things change in your mind to a point, well, wow, should I stick my head up and shoot back? Because it just might get shot off. These kinds of things go through your mind, I'm sure, and need to be sorted out long before you get to that moment. These guys were serving God. They had been practicing and training and studying, and when the moment came, and there it was, there was never a doubt in their mind. King, we don't really have to answer you on this. You know where we are. And if you'll throw us in the furnace, fine. If God wants to save us, he's going to save us. And if he doesn't want to save us, we'll burn up. But here's the bottom line. They ain't worshiping your idol. That decision was made long before they ever got here. My friends, these guys give us a wonderful example of how to deal with sin. Long before the question ever arises, are you going to be there? Are you going to do this? Is this what you need to have it sorted out in your mind according to the scriptures. This is the way God wants me to respond. That's why we study guys like these three. Because we're looking at them and learning lessons about how we deal with sin when Satan pops up and tries to snare us and tries to surprise us and deceive us. Oh, no. We're ready for that. And here's my answer. I think too many people look at consequences first and decide to compromise because of consequences. Sad state of affairs when you look at the pragmatic view of Christianity. I think a lot of people live their whole Christian life like that. Well, let's be a Christian until it becomes inconvenient, and then when it becomes inconvenient, let's find reasons why we shouldn't be the Christian we know we ought to be because it might hurt us. That's not the way we live as Christians. These men did not live that way as Jews, as God's people. They decided long before, we don't worship idols. As a matter of fact, I think it's ironic that here they are in the condition they are in servitude, slavery, never going. By the way, it's a big thing amongst the Israelites. You're having offspring. That's how the Messiah is going to come. These guys had no hope of that. They had no way to have kids anymore. They were out of that link with their Messiah they were looking for. And yet they made their minds up, this is what we're going to do, this is how it's going to be. Long before the thing arose. I admire people who will plan out and understand what they're supposed to do long before they get there. And I am convinced, as I said, courage is about preparation a lot of times. Knowing before the incident gets there, this is how I must answer. And going through those scenarios in your mind saying, that's what God states. It's how he said to do it. And then it makes it so much easier when you know what God said. And here's one of the great benefits. You know what God said. You know how you should respond. And then here is a friend or a loved one or a family member, and they go and approach you with something, and you can say, I love you. You're my best friend, or you're my family member, or you're somebody in my life that means something to me. However, here's how I'm going to answer you, because this is what God teaches. And the beauty of that is they're going to have to get mad at God, not you. Because all you are doing is telling them what God said. I've got kinfolk who won't talk to me. I understand that. I've got friends that have walked away never to speak to me again. And I'll guarantee you, I have turmoil over those kinds of incidents because I keep thinking, what could I have done differently? But I don't know that I could have done anything differently. What I do know is this. I did the best I could at the time it occurred. And it taught me that you haven't quite got it down yet. You got to keep trying, to keep practicing, to keep figuring out what's the best way to tell somebody, I love God first. And when you love God first, all the other things of life are second. And so therefore, these guys went in the furnace. You know the story. You know the account as it's happened, the historical account. They were thrown in the furnace. The king looks down in there. Of course, it was so hot, burned up the guys that threw him in. That'd be a bummer of a duty assignment, right? Throw these guys in the fire, but you're going to get killed, burn it up. And so, he looks down in there, sees 4 people walking around. Wait, I threw 3 in there. Yep, but there's a 4th one. When they came out, their garments didn't even smell like smoke. Now there's a trick. There's something's different. And of course, about that time, Nebuchadnezzar kind of came to himself, because not a hair on their head was singed. There's no explanation for it. It's a miracle. It's the one that most folks get to when they start telling you Daniel's a joke. It's not real. It was written way after the time in which it's been written. Because they can't stand the fact that this miracle is so immensely complete and total. It was a miracle. There's no other way to explain it. Red Sea, yeah, 3 inches, okay, fine. Pharaoh and his army drowned in 3 inches of water, okay, fine. But you can't do anything with this one. It's a miracle. God spared them. Now, I would not expect an overt miracle today, but God's providence is mighty. And God has said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. And God has said He cares for you. What we need to do is commit now. Do the right thing. Say the right thing. Have it in my mind already before the thing arises, before any temptation gets to us. We got to have it figured out. How am I going to respond to this? Let you in on a little secret to close as an illustration. And I know there's lots of people that's done this before, not what I did, but they've done things like this. But I went to Tarleton, one of the 6 colleges I went to, and I went to Tarleton. And I was amazed as an older guy, 40s and so forth, how the state of undress, the state of nakedity, the college students, it's just depressing. And I know me, I'm a guy. And so I ain't looking. And I'd come home at the end of the semester, and my wife would look through my books and stuff. She'd go, wow, where did you get all these pens and pencils? Well, I'm busy looking at the tarmac. I can't look at the sidewalk. I can't look up. Because, what you see when you look up. And that was true. I'm a guy. I know where Satan's going to tempt me, and I ain't going to have it. So I look down. And while I'm looking down, these rich kids in colleges throw pencils like there was nothing. And I'd pick them up, and I'd save them and put them in. But you know what? We all need to be in that kind of circumstance. Whatever our temptation is, yours is different, I know. But whatever it is, be prepared for it, so that when it does arise, and Satan throws it in your face, you just smile and say, I don't really have need to answer you, Satan. I am going with God. If He sees fit to deliver me, that's fine. If He doesn't, fine. But the bottom line is, I will not bow to you. We need to have that conviction long before we get there. That's what these guys, among many things that these guys teach. If you're not a Christian, or if you've fallen sometime, let's get right now. Get back to where you need to be. Make it right with God. And we offer that in an invitation song. Don't you stand as we sing.